I'm back to talking about Tolkien. All right. You may or may not be aware of the thumbnail that you clicked on to get into this video. I hope you are, otherwise you're probably a bot, eh? Provocative, eh? What? Eh, what? The only plot hole in Tolkien was Boromir, right? You know, stuff like this. So that's what I want to be talking about. I want to talk about how the last time I was going through The Lord of the Rings as an audio book, I thought I noticed something that I had never noticed before, and I thought that thing might be a raging plot hole that I had never considered before in Tolkien. Because, you know, Tolkien. He's bloody brilliant. He's one of the best, one of the best. He's a writer that, when you think you find a plot hole, like with the Eagles and stuff like that, actually, typically it's because you're misreading the text and you've got a misapprehension about something, or you need to read deeper or longer and figure out that actually the way he wrote it to happen is actually the only possible way that it could have happened in the world, given either the world building or the logic or whatever, which is what I lay out in my other video about why you shouldn't take the Eagles to Mordor. It's the most comprehensive thing. Anyway, I don't need to gas myself up on that because you've already watched it and you know how right I am. Am I right? Anyway, today I want to talk about something that really just stuck out to me, and I realized, how have I not noticed this before, and how is nobody else talking about this? Because this is huge. This is honestly massive, and it's not people aren't talking about this. People aren't not talking about this because they went through the thought process that I had to afterward to figure out why it's actually not a plot hole, even though it seems pretty close to being once you start thinking about it. But no, it's actually, it explains, how do I phrase this? The seeming plot hole dissolves, or since we're talking about holes, gets backfilled if you analyze Tolkien's philosophy of Middle-earth. It starts sorting itself out. If you look at his philosophy both as a person and both as the philosophy he bakes into Middle-earth, you can figure out why it is that this plot hole is not a plot hole. So what plot hole are we talking about? I'll tell you. Did you think I wasn't going to tell you? Anyway, I'll tell you. It's the whole premise of The Lord of the Rings. It's about the nature, function, and weakness of the ring. It's the knowledge that the people are operating off of to execute the entirety of The Lord of the Rings. The knowledge that they have about the ring. How do they know it? That's what I came across here. So, specifically looking at how do they know that, one, the ring corrupts everything to evil ends, and two, how do they know that Mount Doom is the only spot that it can be destroyed? Now, you're probably already coming up with counter arguments to why this is a plot hole, but that's probably because you haven't heard me explain why I thought this was a plot hole for a second. So, the reason I thought this was a plot hole is in chapter 2, or whatever the devil it is, Gandalf comes to Frodo and lays out to him all this lore about, see, we know that the ring is inherently evil and it's going to corrupt everything because I went and looked at all these histories and I talked to Gollum and blah, 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 and it can be destroyed at Mount Doom. He lays out all this information. Well, I hate to be a bit of a villain, but how does Gandalf get from his information, his observation, to his interpretation and application? It seemed a bit too big of a gap for him to reasonably bridge to be speaking in the axioms he does. Anyway, what do I mean by this? Well, does the ring really turn all things to evil? And you say, well, yeah. I mean, obviously Gandalf studied, and so he knows all the stuff there is to know about the ring. Well, what is there to know about the ring? Not very much, honestly. Gandalf has very little information that he's operating off of to make his conclusion here. One, he knows Bilbo, and he knows that Bilbo has had it for the last 60 years, and he saw how it affected him when he first picked it up versus how it affected him when he had to leave it behind. Two, he's interviewed Gollum, but he puts the fear of fire on Gollum when he finds him in the wilderness near Mordor, and extracts as much information about Gollum's possession and how he came by possessing the ring as he can. And he says it came out in kind of jumbles and mumbles and gargles and warbles, and he had to kind of piece together the story as best he could. And then three, he has Isildur's writings about the ring. And you may be saying, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. That he could... Does it? Isildur had the ring for like 0.2 billionths of a second. He did not have the ring for very long. And he did not acquire the ring the same way Gollum did. So Isildur, when Sauron is beaten to a stalemate by Elendil and Gil-galad, and they both lose their lives and in the fighting defeat him, which if you've watched the movies, you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. Anyway, Isildur comes along, cuts the ring from Sauron's finger and says, I take this as a weregild, that is a blood price for both my brother Anarion, who is killed in the siege of Barad-dûr, and my father, who is just killed in this recent battle. He takes it as a blood price. They do not know that it's evil and take it up to the crack of doom, and then Elrond says, cast it into the fire, and he's like, nah, actually, I'm evil now. Ooh! No, the ring is mine. That's not what happens. Elrond says, hey, we should probably go destroy this, and Isildur says, no, this is one of the most powerful artifacts in Middle-earth that was created by this dude who just killed my dad and my brother and a bunch of our soldiers, and he used this thing to give him the power requisite to do that. Since he killed my people, I'm taking this as a sort of trophy of war and as a thing for me to use, a little trinket, so I can have his power. He didn't know for certain that Sauron's soul would be in the ring or anything like that, I don't think. So that's the information. That's what Isildur does. And does the ring corrupt his ends to evil? Well, we don't really see that. If it does, he's traveling back up north to Arnor, and he gets killed along the way. It doesn't necessarily... We don't ever see the ring twisting his own ends, or his deeds of good into evil ends. We don't see that happen. Well, okay, let's now skip over to Bilbo. He does seem to have a bit of Gollumification, but it's not so much the deeds he's setting out to do. He's setting out to do good deeds, but in the end, the ring turns into evil. In fact, it seems to be the opposite direction. Bilbo takes this evil ring and then goes and does a bunch of good with it, helping out in The Hobbit, beat Smaug and all that stuff. So all the stuff he did with the ring doesn't seem to be turned to evil. Now, admittedly, hobbits are people of little power and can't use much of the ring, so there isn't much that the ring can do to turn their actions to evil. It just kind of corrupts their personality, and that's evident. Yes, that is definitely visible. But as far as like the nothing good can ever be done with the ring, it's inherently evil, so we got to destroy it. Doesn't seem to be evident from that. Anyway, in Gollum's ramblings, he pieced together that Gollum murdered somebody and got the ring, and figured out, okay, it took Gollum and turned him worse and worse until now he's Gollum. Okay? Gandalf knows that. Well, in all three of these accounts, you don't see any of the stuff they're so worried about later on, about how, no, anything we do with the ring, though we mean it for good, it will actually end up in evil. So what orifice is Gandalf talking out of to be coming up with this nonsense, dude? Well, it's not his knowledge from any of those possessions of the ring that he is making this deduction. It's actually a deduction from a different bearer of the ring that he knows this, Sauron. Because he knows that the ring is made by Sauron, and Sauron operates this certain type of way. Sauron as a being is like a deceiver, someone who will turn any good into something evil. He'll take the elves and corrupt them into freaking little orcs. He'll take Ents and fashion a mockery of them called trolls. He'll be captured by Numenor, and in the end turn this sort of chosen people into a busted up, segregated, civil warring kingdom that has one side committing blood rights, human sacrifice to Morgoth, and the other side who are the faithful, Elendil and Isildur and all that. So it's about his knowledge of Sauron and his knowledge that, okay, he made this ring as a deception. He made this ring with part of himself in it, which is why he wasn't destroyed on the slopes of Erodruin. It's because the ring persevered even though he was defeated. Since it was made with his will and his malice and his will to dominate all life and all that sort of thing, and his deception and all that, we can therefore, knowing the maker of the ring, attribute to his creations the attributes that are from him. That's a philosophical connection that Gandalf is making, which is pretty cool. He's deducing more so not from forensic evidence like, oh, Bilbo once sat out to save a guy's life from it, and then the ring tweaked out and killed the dude. It's not stuff like that where it's like cut and dry. Oh, he's trying to do good with it, and then it ended up in evil directly from the ring. No, it's Gandalf's knowledge of Sauron and knowledge that use that no one who is good has tried to put the ring to will actually end up very badly. Anyway, so I think I've covered that long enough. Let's get into the even kind of spicier one. How do we know? How does Gandalf know that freaking the ring can be destroyed in the crack of doom? How does he know this? Well, default answer would be That's just how fantasy stuff works. You can know things about things. You can know it. You can be like, ah, yes, this must be cast back into the fires from whence it came because it sounds cool, and so it must be true. And that would work for J.K. Rowling. That would work for all these other fantasy franchises where people just know bits about the world building that it would actually be impossible to know. They just know it because they have to know it. Otherwise, you can't have the story. If you don't know that this sort of item can be destroyed this way, then you're screwed. So in most other fantasy franchises, they just know it. Even though the item might be a one of a kind that has no parallel in existence, it's a super powerful object that can't be destroyed any other way. And so we know for some reason that it's got to be destroyed this one way. What? Because you've tried everything else? No. So let's start breaking this down. Well, Gandalf knows for certain that it can't be destroyed any other way because he's familiar with the rings of power and their fates, and he knows that some of the lesser rings of power can be consumed by dragonfire, but with the great rings of power, dragonfire isn't even hot enough to touch them. Well, here we come into some interesting ideas. Why is dragonfire able to destroy the lesser rings of power? Well, it's because it's hot enough to destroy them. Okay, that's very interesting, Gandalf. But how do you know that throwing the ring back where it came from is what's going to destroy? Well, it's not because that's the spot where the ring came from, although it is because that's the spot that the ring came from, the Crack of Doom. The forge, Sauron's forge in the Crack of Doom. Are you seeing where I'm going with this? It's another logical, sort of philosophical deduction. It's not a world-building knowledge thing that things can be destroyed where they came from. No, it's literally forging. It's if we don't have any other fire here that's that's even hot enough to mar or scratch the ring. Well, you know what? Sauron's forge was able to make the ring. Sauron's forge is hot enough, or has the tools, is hot enough to heat the ring to a point that it's malleable and can be forged. It can be made. And if something can be made by something, if steel, when you heat it up to a certain temperature, can be forged into a ring, then it stands to reason that steel heated to the same temperature can be unmade, if it can be made. Isn't this crazy? That's why they know that that's where the ring has to be destroyed. It's because it's Sauron's forge. It's not because it's a scary mountain, a scary volcano that the ring came from, so things can be destroyed at their point of origin. It's because, no, they know that Sauron's forge there, as we hear when Sam and Frodo go into Samath Naur, the Crack of Doom, they can hear a great pumping and churning as if great machines are laboring in the earth. Now you might just say, well, that's poetic language for the lava bubbling or whatever. And maybe that's true, but it is also forged. That's where he made the ring. So he forged the ring there. But isn't that crazy? They know they can destroy it there because that's the only place that was powerful enough to make it. It's just a straight sort of linear logical thing. It's not great fantasy explanation about power and origin and the place of the blah, blah, blah. No, this forge was hot enough to make the one ring, so it's hot enough to melt the ring down because it was hot enough to make it soft enough to be made. whatever the ring is made out of. Bloody brilliant!